He was crawling under the library table on his hands and knees when I realized he wasn't just looking for his glasses. He was having a complete breakdown in the middle of the Haverford College reading room. I'd been watching him for 20 minutes from my spot 3 tables over. This tall man in his early 40s with graying hair and the kind of intense concentration that suggested he was wrestling with something much bigger than research. He'd been alternately writing furiously and then staring at his laptop screen like it had personally offended him, and when his glasses had slipped off and clattered to the floor, something in his expression had just crumbled. Now he was muttering under his breath as he searched, and I could hear fragments of what sounded like self-directed frustration mixed with genuine despair. Before I continue this, hit that subscribe button. I post one real story every single day. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I'm always curious who my stories are reaching. The Haverford Library was nearly empty at 9 p.m. on a Thursday, which was exactly why I'd chosen this time to work on my senior thesis. As an English literature major with severe social anxiety and a tendency to overthink everything, I'd learned that late-night library sessions were my refuge from the overwhelming chaos of campus life. But watching this man's quiet crisis unfold was making it impossible to focus on my own work. "Excuse me," I said, walking over to his table with my heart pounding. "Are you okay?" He looked up from where he was still crouched on the floor, and I saw that his eyes were a striking green-gray, the kind that seemed to see everything and forgive nothing, especially when it came to himself. "I'm fine," he said, but his voice cracked slightly on the words. "Just my glasses. I can't see anything without them, and I have to finish this chapter tonight, and..." He trailed off, running a hand through his hair. "Sorry, you don't need to hear about my problems. Did you hear them hit the floor?" I asked, kneeling down beside him. "Maybe we can figure out which direction they went." "Over there, I think." He pointed toward the next table. "But I've already looked everywhere. They've probably been swallowed by the library void, along with my ability to write a coherent sentence." I spotted something glinting under the neighboring table and crawled toward it. "Are these them?" When I held up the glasses, his entire face transformed with relief. "You're a lifesaver," he said, putting them on and blinking a few times. I was starting to think the universe was conspiring against me finishing this book. "You're writing a book?" Something shuddered in his expression, and I saw him consider how much to reveal to a complete stranger. "Trying to," he said finally. "Though it's beginning to feel more like an exercise in self-torture." I stood up, brushing dust off my jeans, and found myself genuinely curious about this man who looked like he carried the weight of the world in his laptop bag. "What kind of book?" "Fiction. Literary fiction, if I'm being pretentious about it." He gestured at his laptop screen, which I could now see was filled with text that had been crossed out and rewritten multiple times. "It's about, well, it's complicated. Most good books are." He looked at me with surprise, like I'd said something unexpected. "Are you a writer too?" "I'm majoring in English Lit. Working on my senior thesis about narrative unreliability in contemporary fiction." I paused. "So I know what it looks like when someone is wrestling with words that won't cooperate. What's your thesis about specifically?" "The way authors use unreliable narrators to explore trauma and memory. How sometimes the most honest truths come from characters who can't be trusted to tell the story accurately." Something flickered across his face. Recognition, maybe, or interest. "That's fascinating," he said. "And incredibly relevant to what I'm trying to write." "Really?" My protagonist, she's dealing with the aftermath of losing her sister in a car accident. And I keep struggling with how much she should remember accurately versus how much her grief is distorting her perception of events. I felt something click into place, that electric feeling of intellectual connection that I'd been searching for throughout my entire college experience. "May I?" I gestured toward the empty chair across from him. "Please." I sat down and looked at his laptop screen, which showed a paragraph that had been edited so many times it was barely readable. "Can I ask what's making you stuck?" He was quiet for a moment, and I could see him debating how honest to be. "I'm afraid I'm exploiting something I don't have the right to write about," he said finally. "The car accident, the grief, it's not entirely fictional. My younger sister died in a car crash when I was 35. And I keep wondering if I'm using her death as material for my book or if I'm actually processing something real. The raw honesty in his words hit me like a physical blow. "I'm so sorry," I said. That's an incredibly difficult thing to navigate. "Thank you." He closed his laptop, giving me his full attention. "I've been working on this book for 3 years, and I'm terrified that if I finish it, I'll have to face whether it's actually any good. And if it's not good, then what was all this suffering for? What if it is good? That might be even scarier." I understood that fear, the way success could feel just as terrifying as failure when you'd invested everything in a dream. "Can I tell you something?" I said. "Of course." "I've been working on my thesis for 8 months, and I'm absolutely convinced it's terrible. Every day I sit down to write, I'm certain that my advisor is going to read it and realize I have no business being an English major, let alone applying to graduate programs." "Are you applying to graduate programs?" I was. "I am." "I don't know." I laughed, but it came out shaky. "I've always wanted to be a professor, to teach literature and maybe write criticism. But the more I work on this thesis, the more I'm convinced I don't have anything original or important to say." "What makes you think that?" "Because I'm 25 and I haven't lived enough to have real insights about trauma and memory and all these heavy topics I'm writing about. I'm just a kid who's read a lot of books and thinks she understands something about the human condition." He was quiet for a moment, studying my face with those perceptive green-gray eyes. "Can I tell you what I think?" he said. "Okay." "I think you're wrong." "About what?" "About not having lived enough. About not having real insights." He leaned forward. "You just spent 20 minutes watching a stranger have a crisis in a library, and instead of ignoring it or walking away, you came over to help. Then you listened to me explain my writing problems without judgment or advice, just genuine curiosity about the work itself. That's just basic human decency." "No, it's not. It's empathy. It's the ability to see when someone is struggling and respond with kindness instead of self-protection." He paused. "That's exactly the kind of insight that makes for meaningful writing about trauma and memory." I felt something warm unfurl in my chest, something that felt dangerously close to hope. "You really think so?" "I know so. And I think your thesis advisor is going to be impressed by work that comes from someone who understands that literature isn't just about analyzing text. It's about understanding why people tell stories and how those stories help us make sense of pain. What would you do if you were in my place? Tell me in the comments." We looked at each other across the small table, and I felt something shift between us. Something that went beyond shared academic interests or mutual writerly angst. "What's your name?" I asked. Michael Chin. "I'm Arya." "Nice to meet you, Arya." He smiled, and it transformed his entire face, made him look younger and less burdened. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Would you be willing to read what I've written so far? I know we just met, but talking to you about unreliable narrators and trauma, I think you might understand what I'm trying to do in a way that other people haven't." My heart started racing. "You want me to read your novel?" "If you have time. And only if you want to. I know you have your own work to focus on." "I'd love to read it." "Really?" "Really. But only if you'll read my thesis chapters. I could use a fresh perspective from someone who understands the relationship between fiction and real life." "Deal." We spent the next 30 minutes talking about his teaching position at a nearby community college, my plans for graduate school, and the way the library felt different at night when it was empty except for truly desperate students. "I have to admit something," I said as we watched the library security guard making his rounds. "What?" "When I first saw you having a breakdown under that table, I almost didn't come over. I was scared of getting involved in someone else's crisis." "What changed your mind?" "You looked like how I feel most of the time. Lost and frustrated and carrying something too heavy to manage alone." I paused. "I thought maybe if I helped you find your glasses, I might figure out how to help myself find whatever I've been looking for." "What have you been looking for?" "Proof that I belong here. That I'm not just pretending to be smart enough for this academic world." I laughed shakily. "I'm a first-generation college student from small-town Ohio. My parents still don't understand what I'm studying or why it matters. Academia is helping people. Teaching literature, analyzing stories that help us understand human experience, that's vital work." Michael closed his laptop and looked at me directly. Arya, can I tell you why I really want you to read my novel? Okay. Because you've shown more intuitive understanding of what I'm trying to accomplish than my writing group has in 3 years. You get that fiction isn't just entertainment, it's a way of processing things too complex for regular conversation. The security guard cleared his throat meaningfully, and we realized we were the last people in the library. We exchanged email addresses, and as Michael packed up his laptop, I found myself not wanting this conversation to end. Michael, I said as he shouldered his bag. Yeah, why were you so frustrated earlier? Before you dropped your glasses. His expression grew complicated again, and I saw him wrestling with how much to reveal. I was trying to write the scene where my protagonist finally remembers what actually happened the night her sister died, he said quietly. And I realized I've been avoiding it for 3 years because I'm not sure I'm ready to face those memories myself, even in fiction. Maybe that's exactly why you need to write it. What do you mean? Maybe the reason it's so hard to write is because it's the most important part of the story. The part that will make everything else make sense. Michael stared at me, and I saw something like recognition dawn in his eyes. You know what? He said. You're absolutely right. I am. Yes. And I think I'm going to go home tonight and write that scene, even if it's terrible, because you just reminded me that avoiding the difficult parts doesn't make them go away. And I'm going to go back to my dorm and work on the chapter about how unreliable narrators can actually tell more truth than reliable ones, because you reminded me that having insights at 25 is still having insights. We walked out of the library together, and when we reached the point where our paths diverged, Michael turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Arya, he said. Thank you. For what? For helping me find my glasses. And for reminding me why I wanted to write this book in the first place. Thank you for reminding me that my work matters. It does matter. And so do you. The words hung between us in the cool Pennsylvania air, loaded with meaning that went beyond writerly encouragement. I'll email you my chapters tomorrow, I said. And I'll send you what I have so far. Good. Good. But neither of us moved to leave. Arya? Michael said finally. Yeah. Would you maybe want to get coffee tomorrow? To discuss the work, I mean. It might be helpful to talk through some of these narrative issues in person. My heart leaped, but I tried to keep my voice steady. I'd like that. Great. There's a place called The Grind near campus. Do you know it? I know it. Tomorrow at 3? Tomorrow at 3. The next day, I spent time choosing what to wear to what was supposedly just an academic discussion. Michael was already seated at a corner table when I arrived at The Grind. You actually came, he said, standing up when he saw me. Did you think I wouldn't? I wasn't sure if last night was real or if I'd imagined meeting someone who understood what I was trying to do. We ordered coffee and settled into what became the most stimulating conversation I'd ever had. Michael had printed out his chapters, and as I read, I found myself completely absorbed. This is beautiful, I said, looking up from the pages. The way you write about how grief distorts memory, it's exactly what I've been trying to articulate in my thesis. Really? This passage where she's trying to remember her sister's last words, but can't separate what happened from what she wishes had happened, that's a perfect example of how unreliable narration can be more honest than reliable narration. Explain that. If your protagonist remembered everything perfectly, the story would be less true to the actual experience of loss. The unreliability is what makes the emotional truth so powerful. So the distortion is the point. Exactly. We talked for hours, finding connections between our work that neither of us had seen before. By the time we looked up, the coffee shop was nearly empty. I should probably get going, I said reluctantly. I have to teach tomorrow. You teach. T for Introduction to Literature. I gathered my things. What about you? Community college. Composition and world literature. Michael, I said carefully. Can I ask you something? Of course. Is this just about the work? This connection we have when we talk about writing. He was quiet for a moment. I don't know, he said finally. I know it started with the work. But watching the way your face lights up when you talk about narrative theory, I think it might be about more than just the work. What might it be about? It might be about the fact that I haven't felt this intellectually engaged with another person in years. It might be about the way you challenge my ideas without dismissing them. He looked at me directly. It might be about the fact that I'm attracted to your mind in a way that's making it difficult to pretend this is just professional collaboration. 6 months later, Michael finished his novel. He said I was right about the difficult scene being the most important one. Once he wrote it, everything else fell into place. The book was published 8 months after that, and it won a literary prize that I absolutely saw coming because I'd watched him wrestle those words into something beautiful and true. My thesis was accepted with highest honors, and I'm starting my PhD program in the fall. Michael jokes that he's dating someone who understands his work better than he does, but the truth is, we understand each other in ways that go far beyond literature. Before I go, thank you. These stories are real. They're mine, and I share one every day. If you want to hear more, subscribe. We still meet at the grind every week, Michael and I, usually with laptops and notebooks spread across our table while we work on our respective projects. And sometimes, when one of us is struggling with a particularly difficult passage, the other will reach across the table and adjust their glasses or offer a fresh perspective. And we'll remember that the best discoveries happen when you're helping someone else find what they're looking for.